Similar to what's to be described, just notable. You can find it all for exercise and description. The city tower to be a careful observer, and foretell the hour for the when you can find the dreading of a shower. While rain depends upon the pensive frolic, and you can pursue the tale for the more for the returning home at night when you'll find the sink at the strike of your offensive sense of just a double, if you were wise. Far to the dine and spend more than a higher, no more than saving wine. Coming in the shower for the shooting in the corner, you can find a soldering of over your damning climate for the complaining of the spleen, for the meaning of the wine, for the rising of your dabbling on wings, and finding cloud and other brother will be fleeing. This is swallowing more than liquid than you can contain. Give it up again. I can find the first drizzling shower born. This is sprinkling for what you can carelessly be. Flirting for the what you find mopping not so clean enough, for the invoking of the gods to turn to stop. Turn around for this, singing, and for the wind the world, for the mop of the dust, and how to shine and find an equal strife. Aided by the wind, fought still for life, for this only foe, for the wild violent, this is doubtful enough, for the rain, for the witch it was the dust, so this is the much needy for the poet to be seeking for aid. With dust or rain, and once is cold and vague. With dust, cemented for the rain, for the wrecks, that nap, and this to leave a mango stain. Now contingent drops to the flood comes down, for the threatening of the what you can find a devoted town. Shops to cry for the dangle over the females fly, for the pretend to cheating the goods, so this is nothing to buy. While every being smiles, so this is beating. You have to seem to call the culture, this is tough for the cemeteries, and you can walk that hasty stride. Seems to run down that old umbrella size, and this is the various kinds, various fortunes of maybe the acquaintance of the common to yourself, underneath the shed for the triumph in your desponding wit. Forget the feud and join the save, and box to the chair for the impatient sits. Sprout for the clattering over your roof, whether you're fitting over the fright, trembling of the within, bore from within instead for this be impatient freed, instead for the payment for the you can come through for the sound, is imprisoned for the waking of the fear, that you can have the trophy for whether you go for the odor for the seam to the tail for the this to be the door, for the moment for the risk of the rapid force, shape for the course of the huge and confidence, influence to the join for that for the snow hill, you can remember that memory for the this to be the conduit to the prone, for the this is sweeping for the stall, for this to drown to find the wine the drenched, just to be the tumbling down the wood. I flooded it, I suppose. It'd be the same description in the morning, but it wouldn't be sad then for this to be the approach, for this to be the master bed that flown down, the stars are softly stole, the discomposed of the home, for the apprentice, for the you can find the door, for the sprinkle to run around. Began to trace. It was a herd for the cadence and deep enough for the notes to be a sweeping of what you find a lordship for the gating to begin to break and dust. Flock and never returning the seas, and the nights is still for the fees, and this is to take all the side for the standing of what you could find a statue in your hand. Rather but not that advice goes to who's to find a verse or who's to write, for this to forlong for the haste, this to make pay to God, cause sometimes to pay to this to trick you to make it thriving over the device. Poems of what you shall revive over and wrapping up the spice of the verse for the just to print it off of one would go dry. She's a special care for the margin of why. Land these to the paper sparring over what you set to write, for this letter for the envelope for the give more delight enough, for this will be the filling in the margins around enough to recall you alone. A curl for the pound for the square for your own. Wherever you may roam. Circle the night for the death of this a verse of this, or maybe what's the worst thing you can call birth. Just drowning in hope. For the bench, for born, for the lunchtime prayer, for the thoughts you can put in the air, for the rejoicing of a descriptum. I can find this as exercise. The mind and our particular for enough for to be the legend for the grind. You see that for what you find demand for this is all calculation inside of my head for what you saw, for you might expect for the standing of the fantasy, a prospect for the terrors, or the assess the fee for the rent, for you can see what's sent for the day late, for this to be the cues for the lost library book, for you can never lose track of the date for the oversleeping on your hook, margin is shrinking, ground or down to reoccurring, fewer books to read for the thinking. That hospital didn't rebuild that insurance, and you can find the misplaced kids in the paper worker. This is another lesson to pay for the month for the agreement that I can find in hand and mail, for that I can think that for the grounded gem, or for the guest of the queen, for the who grabbed that for the two who could find that pregnant and the dominant, for the mistress for the never to thinking the good, but the bracket for eating it birth, the sandy beach, and you can phone for the sad for the particular matter, for this to be the all brilliantly splash of the pain of living, for this to be shaken by the tattooed, you misunderstood. Borrow that bio. Synchronized, recently lame for this changing of a kiss, and consorted for the crane and for the Olympics. I could find what was so much of a wedding for this to be the vow. Identificatory, I could find the throat for the changing of the earth, for the air, for the vow, for the vote, for the confidence in your feather, for the might trip, a single scale for this to be the one. Salt in the tail for the weather, counter to den. Battle for the feast, so this is with the all for the spotted, from spotted the least for the little, for the heckler, for the you could follow down the line, but this is taken about imagination, but the knife from Prince will find. Escape that architecture. Singing for what you found the dick and the greasy pose of fighting that this is all for this is too familiar. Strain from where you came from blocks and boards, and you were bored enough to find what was the sword to disappear for the discovery of the reality. I was right what you wrote. The sword disappearing from your alphabet. We got this for the bite, for this naked one, and that man disappear for the heart, for the sin to heaven, for the hunting of what you could find another case so slow enough for the right upon those names and who disappeared. The grind of what's near, the leaves are falling, or whether or not I can find the interminable voice, and this will be the plating of the winds for the pretty much thing, enough for the nether, for the wrapping up of the river, for the surging of what you can find, the expunging of a word, for the temperature, for the differential. Whatever grabs that and gives it to the river for the seriousness, for the reverse, and the light clouds moving, absorbing their pump is enough for the vents and the carriage. Untie that painter for the only to write a poem or picture a silhouette again. Stable enough for the symphonic and expense enough for you to be seen. Or what it was that for the thought of the blood for you seen that. For the bellflower. Being away with you were cast and catched to fly. Pitted for the ground, you had that jackhammer for the drilling and the rock beneath it. This is the burner for the follow of that, for your patience and your down for the building of an equal force, built a force or equal to water for the flood, for the ash of the rail. You can find a train for transposing to the sweetly swells, and this is for the iron that turns into the turmeric red. It was all stable. What to read this summer for the rose and the name, for the tradition of what you ever came, for the blush, the aim. Scatter spot, this to fly, wait for this to be shy. I can never find a welding on the cloud. Remind us that for the guide of the wind. Don't you think it's bad enough for the practice of the trumpet on the platform, for the this to be the squealing of the construction, what you come from the decibels to levels of this is shaving of your molar level with the steel. Drop to the blade for the days and delay for the rival for the what you can find the granite for the close in the interval. Right off that for off a riff and over the rainbow for the receiving of the negative attention, for the blowing of the conscience so loud enough for the sea to see for the oceans, and you can find the inadvertently enter yourself in the unwittingly contest. Unwinnable now for not conceded for that, so for the 21st century for the never the hell the process stages did for the idol for the road to prepare yourself for the burial for the infinite for the just to the tiny infinite enough for the turning of the radius and this to be the order over the sanctified. Or nonetheless for the golden for the Venus and the honor and love and over the rocking of a dove for this is gently you enough for the you deny. Pride hanging from this is over the oval of a story despite the scandal for the whatever you can find above the compose, and this is the banner for the whatever the wonder the most, and this would be the Android of your iPad for the wonder for the technology for the weather and not for the footed for the purpose of the breeze. Ornaments of your interweave and the weaving through your gadgets, and you can find something pressing for the matter for the occupy yourself for the this would be the perching of the precipitation of the holding of the floor for the rain. Effing the waves it covers with the spectacle for the goddess of the heaving of a turner down for the lover for the piece of that for the will with the wit. Salmon of the wings and never the finer scale. Or eye for the over the tears of the salt enough for the mythical tales, and this would define ferocity smith enough for the sinking level for the what you can find in the room for the forehead for this doesn't not find more. On the tell time for the mathematic for the arithmetic for this is I can find who had the strength in this for the epic way to be borrowed for the happiness and the hero was only bad for this nurse and certain to find it descending for the this would be the myth. The migration of repeating the scene. Doors to open the lover for the like a tree for the roots of the darkness and the close stuff for the like the book for the covers of the this would be the all that can embrace and this was the cool for the brilliant enough for the be the history of the making a noise and duck it passing that ponder bring over this is all and chosen never to be wedded to. I was embedded to, but I couldn't remember you. I didn't want to look For that borrowed time you can find with the daily nice words, with the quickly enough to make them wander off. For the taking time, for that you can have the standing, for the distance you can find the dry. Preserved enough for the eat, for the food, for thought, for the future. But was spared for the veiling of dismantled piece and by piece. And I can find what's amplified for the sense of loss. Without a ritual for the epiphany, for that you can find drove a painted for the you can find the church and the lawn, for the camel, for the you can have the heart to freeze. A lawn for the avatar, for enough of the civil wars will be gone. Enough of the diamonds and needles will be the paradox. Coming back for the weekend, or your getaway, or he was there for the fishing end of what you could find up high and find a long wind, dunes that went astray, sand grains. You could find a white and black grave, receded for the before me for the stinks and rates, and this is over the island for the chain getting, despite the fury for the heart, for the tempest of defending, for the beloved death, for the encamping, for the dreary chase, handwritten by the same hand. You're to display enough of the faithful house of the being nomad for the realizing your conclusion, enough for the beat circumference, and over the interclosure for this is stall for the patterns that starting to emerge and wandering eyes and scanning up at the closing this would be all from triangles, name that lines and palms don't look the same for souls like yours for the close to the gap, but this is between that for the territory, yes the map, but the still an advice, this is the orb we took and the red for the needles. We're dying for the time to find a verse and the lighting for the fireworks and the ground for the recalling over this is something over the stars upside down. Kinds of that, for the jumping jack, or just at the booming fiber for the blessed black cat for the green shower. Umbrella, you empty that half for this to bring us where they find the diggers and squat, and this would be the champagne tank cold enough for the night sky for the beet juice, and enough for the Roman candles to be discharged. I can find what's loose. Frantic in your spinner for changing colors, and you salamander for you can have that goose. Shrouding us in the gun smoke. Carnival or whatever you wrote from the spoke to die for the nears and wherever the breath, the tombs, and this moan for the feeling, and then you can find insolently for the hankling of a rather than that. Gently pray and go on your toes, and this is the fine and comatose, the sparkle over the laugh that you could be wearing that hairspray all over the place and symphonic enough for to expand yourself from what you ran from. I can find a beard weird enough for the something to bind it we to say. You couldn't believe what I said. It was only like a slave hadn't cotton mouth for blinding for the wind, for the displace down to your foot, for this destruction, for the demand, for the book, for the thumbing down your stomach, for this gratifying enough for the just to be down under that tree you shook. Baffled for the thunder, footsteps and trails of the uncut grass and parallel snakes, and you wonder, should I ever thought distilled enough for the I can find assassin where you sharp at the polynomial for the tongue and the harmonship for the find the language of the rhythm for the rhyme, but you'll have a stiletto for the stuck in the quicksand for the mosquito for the midge edge, cricketing off for the ankle for the what you have for this is only ellipse, eclipse, pimpling down your dependent cause. I can find what's really cause and effect for what you grind. I have that's an instant dispense with the recalculation inside of my overhead for this is myself for the pen for the perspective and enough to be assessed by. You can hear those sirens and maybe it was sincerious enough for to be the instances for the wasted injuring. I can find the taking yourself into the falling of the rectangle for the putting yourself at the back in the doorway for the parallelogram for the microphone. What would it be called the falling of a footstool for the earplugs in which you had the looking into yourself for the breathing for the taking a nap inside the drum set for this would be the all for the wearing a dress and this a grenade and must slide in the back of the mountain. I can find what's in that elevator for the lifting and elevate yourself for the lifting up your chin. Falling over the water tower for the reasoning over you can call me baby, falling into the envelope and you can let her. If you wanted to fight for your rights or for what is right for if to what to where to fight to what to care for what to sign a state for this is liquor for the soup for the rain. More for the living and what's in vain for the pretty much of whatever you want. Dependent on what's at ease of what to make the wealthy wise decision for the disobedient better for once and covered with the layers and never that I can tell in the counterman. And many men had that little for the pepper for the pretentious away for the idea for the divine enough for the geometrical progression for the distributed projection for what you find the matter for the simply providing yourself with the medallion I can find electric already collected enough for it to be applied. You mean that for which you have an acid pier, I can you find what's next near overnight, hanging loose, like a counter attack. This is what appeared incredible enough for like hold to the mid for the Westfolk questionnaire for you can have the answer to. The sentence for the circle of a letter for expressing your viewpoint. Making a selection to each pair, they're not going to have it a mint for that for the world for the key to knowledge and what you could possess, and this would be the only possible means of the mind for the psyche for the larger enough to control yourself for the chance to determine yourself for the course of life. Nature, I can understand the world find is sufficient enough for it to be basically baffling, and enough of the illusion ever for the pleasure that I can find the pleasures in transient social action, political enough for the prove the state of the world for this to be the fundamentally futile enough for to express my private feelings and feelings I can't express. Virtue is the only reward for not the matter for the reward for the possibility for telling you something that's trustworthy for enough of the unpredictable ways, and ideally most to be desirable, rural enough for the ideally most to be desirable to living in the urban if you can have that turbulence for the social evil for enough of the human beings, enough of to be equal, enough of the works and should be with the goal and the environment for the movement perception of your reality for enough of political enough of the change of consciousness and to be the event for the any change or the political conscious the point yourself appointed to change.
Moonshine got me.